This is Business Today. On this program, we talk about business, entrepreneurship, and many insightful topics with individuals with a lot of experience in those relevant fields. And today we have a very important topic to discuss about. So keep tuning in whilst we discuss business today. This episode, we have with us the Group Sustainability Engineer of Brandix Apparel Limited. And to know more about who this individual is, let's take a look at the character profile. Driven by the interest towards renewables and alternate energy, Vinura joined Brandix as part of the group's sustainability team, responsible for overlooking the company's sustainability initiatives across the company's global manufacturing footprint. After completing his secondary education at Stafford International School, Vinura went on to graduate from the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom with a Master's in Mechanical Engineering, specializing in sustainable energy systems. Vinura is currently the Group Sustainability Engineer of Brandix, leading the energy pillar, and is actively engaging in driving the group's ambitious but timely goal of achieving net zero carbon status across all its facilities in Sri Lanka by 2023 and its facilities in India by 2025. Prior to this, Vinura led the group's Earth Pillar and was instrumental in facilitating Brandix's partnership with the UNDP on sustainable sourcing of biomass. He is also a member of the steering committee of the UN Global Compact Network, Sri Lanka. Vinura, good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, so I'd like to start off by giving our viewers about a small definition about sustainability.
Yeah, basically this whole concept of sustainability was brought in, I would say, about somewhere around the early 90s by a gentleman in the name of John Elkington, who spoke about what is known as the triple bottom line, ideally people, planet and profit. Largely the definition of sustainability has remained the same, but now we have seen the triple bottom line progress to environmental, social and governance. For a long answer to your short question, basically sustainability is to improve and enhance the performance of these three aspects, irrespective, it can be an organization, an individual, a nation. So essentially to enhance these three elements.
Okay, now when it comes to sustainability, does it just apply to the climate, or is there a people aspect to it as well?
Absolutely, I think that's a great question, because there is a misconception, because people think sustainability is just about climate change, about emissions, but not really. There is in fact a lot more to do with it, because obviously while emissions play a big role, social sustainability, as I mentioned, and also the economic aspect of sustainability definitely has a lasting effect. I would go more into detail, I think, a bit later, but definitely everything is interconnected. So I think the initiatives that we do in saving the environment definitely has I would say, a lasting impact on the people and also the communities as well.
Okay, now we see a lot of companies around the world are going green, and we've heard about how important it is to be sustainable, but how important is it?
I think it is very important, especially representing Brandix. I'll have to say this sustainability or ESG performance is something that's been largely looked at even from a regulatory point of view around the world. And we've seen a trend where companies looking to invest are really looking at this ESG performance of companies, almost like a litmus test basically. And as a result, I guess definitely yes, sustainability would be important. And for us as a company, obviously, we've begun our journey about almost 2 decades ago. And it has really helped us align ourselves easier. So irrespective of what sort of pressure that may come from regulatory authorities, I feel that we are very much aligned and quite literally help us sustain.
Okay, and what made you select this field, the sustainability field? What were you interested in it from a very young age? Tell us about it.
I think yes, obviously it was largely fueled by my university career. Obviously I specialized in sustainable energy, and despite having the privilege of studying abroad, I've always wanted to come back, and we see a massive potential in Sri Lanka. Obviously might not be from a technological aspect, but at least from an implementation point of view. We have a lot of energy, a lot of resources that we can harness, And I guess that's where really my interest came to. And thankfully, I've obviously joined Brandix, which I would say is one of the leading companies when it comes to this field.
Okay, and how did you get to where you are right now? You are currently the group sustainability engineer. Yeah. How did you start off your career exactly?
So basically, right after I graduated, I joined Brandix, a part of the sustainability team, and from since as a company that I guess has been very mature in the field, I've learned a lot from the company, from my team. I think it will be, it's pertinent to kind of mention the fantastic team that we've had at Brandix as well. We have a lot of, I guess, global milestones. I think the viewers might have seen a picture, which is actually a facility in Batiklo.
Okay.
It's the world's first net zero carbon apparel manufacturing facility, and this has really, it was a massive milestone not only for the company but even for the country as well.
Okay, and any challenges you faced, any particular challenges which were difficult to overcome on your journey?
I guess the thing is that the whole idea of sustainability is rather new, in the sense that we know what would happen if we don't follow a certain path of action, but we do not really know exactly what we need to do to really mitigate the effects.
Okay.
So I guess that is definitely a challenge, and going further, I guess you see, sustainability is not just confined to the four walls of our organization. There are a lot of direct and indirect constituents to our environmental performance as well. So while we can do almost everything in our control, I guess the challenge would be to have our partners from both upstream and downstream to really connect with us in our journey, so that our entire value chain is actually, I would say, sustainable.
Okay, and let's speak a bit about Sri Lanka's position when it comes to being sustainable. Tell us about this.
I think we do have a great potential, and as I mentioned before, a lot of investors are really looking at this ESG performance, and I am very sure that this is one element that we can ideally have a competitive advantage over. Obviously, we have been known, the country has been known very well when it comes to the apparel manufacturing phase, but I think to really go on to the next step, because we already have very good environmental and social support systems, I would say, and to go forward, I think sustainability will be very important, not only for the industry but for the country as well.
Okay, and when you compare Sri Lanka with some of the other countries, foreign countries, what are some of the things that we can implement from some of those countries?
I think mainly probably not the initiatives per se, but I would say sort of a governing mechanism. That is why even as a company we have embarked in what is known as a ESG framework.
Okay.
So environmental social governance framework. Not only because obviously we have done a lot of the work, but to make sure that sustainability is not just a function, but it really runs through all functions within the organization. I think that is something that we are currently looking at, and something that would be important as a best practice when it comes to leading organizations globally.
And when it comes to the mindset of people, because that's where it all begins when it comes to any initiative, we really need to change how people think, their perspective. How do you think we can really work on that? How can we change people's mindset to believe that this is really happening and we must do something to mitigate the effects of human pollution? I
think awareness is definitely up there, but mainly it's not just about awareness, but we would have to bring in that aspect of relatability. We'll have to relate it to individuals. So it's not just a matter of building sustainable or rather, adopting sustainable practices, but to see how that translates to every citizen in the country. I think that would really help, because sometimes it may look like I do not play a role in this, but it definitely does. Even something as small as switching off or rather switching off a light if not in use, it goes a long way. I mean, if you take Brandix for example, we have more than 50,000 employees, so even a drop of water saved is a significant amount.
Correct. And when it comes to the tools that we can use to ensure this sustainability, tell us about this.
I think, as I mentioned before, this ESG framework is definitely a very important tool. Once again, not just to govern the whole sort of framework, but also to identify risks better. In addition to that, in the phase of or in the sphere of climate change, I guess there are many global platforms that organizations can be on board to help set targets. We speak about this global warming. There's a very famous 1.5 degrees Celsius is the extent that we are expected to limit global warming, and there are tools available, especially in global organizations such as the Global Compact have really got together to produce these platforms, and organizations can be a part of it to align their sustainability goals with the world's climate change goals, basically.
Okay, and how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has affected this whole process of going green in Sri Lanka especially?
I do not think it has a massive impact, because as I mentioned, we have started way back in 2007, and it's just a matter of connecting or rather continuing what we have done, because 2007 was not really a year that sustainability was the topic that people spoke about.
Correct.
But for us, even back in 2008, our facility in Sidua was once again the world's first LEED Platinum rated apparel manufacturing facility. So for anyone who doesn't know what LEED is, it stands for Leadership in Engineering and Environmental Design. It's basically, in layman's term, it's a green rating system for buildings. And at the time, we gained the highest points for this facility. And as I mentioned, obviously challenges would come, but it's a matter of continuing where you left off.
Okay, and let's touch on a bit about some of the major projects that you did with Brandix.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, Sidua was definitely, I would say, what really kicked off our sustainability journey. Then of course Batiklo, which became the world's first net zero carbon apparel manufacturing facility. We have our 1,000-acre park in India. It's a vertically integrated apparel city. And also obviously going forward, we hope to achieve net zero carbon status in all our Sri Lankan manufacturing facilities by 2023.
Okay.
And India by 2025.
And any particular projects where you worked really closely with the nitty-gritty of it all?
I guess probably, I think Batiklo, as I mentioned, was a very significant milestone for us. And most recently, we did our sustainability summit as well. So that is our sort of take on inspiring beyond, I would say, to not only do the good, but also to express how everybody can be a part of it, to move that dialogue forward. I think that was definitely something that we started last year, and we hope to improve and hope to really engage, irrespective of industry, how we can take this topic of sustainability forward.
Right, and well, we know that the youth is the future of this country, and any country for that matter. Now, you and I being of this youthful age, how do you think we can really affect our peers in a positive way and ask them to go green? Because let's be honest, sometimes when it comes to this young age, people really live carefree, and you can't really go up to them speaking about being sustainable.
Yeah.
It might be frowned upon. How do you think you can overcome this and really make a shift in the youth's mindset?
I think, yes, about the carefree aspect, but at the same time, if you consider from a consumer's point of view, us being in the apparel industry, consumers are much more, I would say, aware of what their products or rather the environmental impact that their products have, and they are in fact pressuring large brands to sort of understand, how much environmental, how much emissions does this garment produce, how much of water does it consume, what happens to the waste. So I would say, while there is an element of I would say greenwashing as well, but consumers are much more aware, much more interested to know about what really happens, not only once they're wearing it, but also after they wear it. So I guess in terms of youth, it's about being transparent. I think that's the main thing. And once again, as I mentioned before, to relate to them as well.
Right, and you mentioned a very interesting word, greenwashing.
Yeah.
Now, we've spoken about it on a previous episode of Business Today, but just to refresh our viewers' memory, would you mind just giving us a brief explanation about what greenwashing is?
Yeah, very shortly, I guess it's just a matter of, it's sort of like a lack of, I would say, maybe transparency, or it can be a project that we just do just for the sake of doing it. I think even if you look at, we refer to as the Conference of Parties, which was delegated by the UNFCCC. Essentially, the whole idea was to not only set targets, but make sure that it's translated to actions as well. So I guess that's an element of what I meant by greenwashing. So it's important to, as I mentioned, have a governing structure, and from a Brandix point of view, we have been disclosing all of our environmental, social and governance initiatives. We are in fact the first corporate entity to publish a fully fledged sustainability report according to the GRI framework and externally verified. So there are steps, once again, as I mentioned, global platforms as well, to ensure that what you do is exactly what you report as well.
Right. Now, speaking a little in detail about the challenges of going green, what are some of the challenges you see in the present day, and what do you think we can do to overcome them?
Yeah, as I mentioned again, it's probably to engage the value chain as well. As I mentioned, I would say while we are happy as an organization to be deemed net zero eventually, the real benefit would be, I think, if we can say the entire apparel supply chain is net zero in terms of emissions at least. And I guess that's where really the challenge is. But I think a lot of socially, environmentally conscious employees and management authorities are really getting into this whole aspect of sustainability. So I feel like it's definitely a challenge that we can overcome. Okay.
And for our young viewers out there, you've reached somewhat of a position. I would say you have a long way to go, but you've come pretty far as well. What are some of your advices to people or youngsters just entering the corporate field?
I think it's good to be genuine in the sense that see, the whole idea of, I think, the youthful aspect is that, you mentioned carefree, and I think that's a good thing in the sense that you should be open about what you feel. I think thankfully for me, even in the organization, the company has given me that freedom, and I think mainly to bring in those new ideas, because we need to continuously reinvent ourselves, and I think as the youth, that's definitely what we can do. So I would say don't feel worried, don't think, oh, is this stupid, is this a dumb question to ask? It's not, it's always put it out there, because you never know, that may be something that no one has ever thought of. So I guess be yourself, obviously, and do not be afraid to be a bit creative.
That's great advice. And when it comes to some advice that you can give us on getting sustainable or to become more sustainable, what would that be?
Look, I mean, I think it will change in terms of the stakeholders. So what we as an individual will do to become sustainable is slightly different to what an organization would do. But from an organization point of view, I could say, obviously, to if you haven't started in your sustainability journey, it's always never too late. You can always go ahead with it. And also, as I mentioned, these global platforms, be a part of it. It will be very helpful. And also adopt this ESG framework, which I feel will definitely be a turning point in the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insightful knowledge, and it was a very nice discussion today. Thank you for being with us. That was Vinura Jayawardene, the Group Sustainability Engineer of Brandix Apparel Limited. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you for having me.
And that winds up today's episode of Business Today. Do join us next time as well. Till then, good night.